I went to visit my son's new home, but my daughter-in-law refused to let me inside. I stood there on the driveway holding those lemon cookies, while my daughter-in-law blocked the entrance to what used to feel like family ground, and I felt my chest tighten with a familiar stubbornness that had gotten me in trouble my whole life, because when someone tells me no, my first instinct is always to push harder to prove them wrong, to make them see reason, even when maybe I should just walk away and think things through first. "Sabrina, I just want to see Myra for an hour, maybe two," I said, hearing that edge creep into my voice that Lillian used to warn me about, that tone that made people dig in their heels instead of softening. She crossed her arms tighter, and I noticed how the afternoon sun caught the hardness in her eyes. "Elias, we've talked about this. You can't just show up whenever you feel like it. This is our home now, not yours." The way she said our home strung, because I remembered signing those mortgage papers with Adrian 5 years ago when they needed help with the down payment, and now apparently that meant nothing. My jaw clenched and I could feel my temper rising like it always did when I felt disrespected or dismissed, and I knew I should probably count to 10 or take a breath, but instead I stepped closer to the porch. "I helped buy this house," I said, immediately regretting how petty it sounded. "Don't do this," Sabrina warned. "Don't make this about money." Before I could respond, the door burst open, and Myra came running across the lawn with tears streaming down her face, clutching something in her small hands, and my heart just broke seeing her like that. Grandpa, look what I found," she sobbed, pressing a wrinkled photograph into my hands. I looked down and felt the world tilt sideways, because it was us, all of us, from 10 years ago at the lake cottage, when Lillian was still alive and healthy, and Myra was just a baby sitting on her lap, and we all looked so impossibly happy. "Where did you get this, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling down to her level. "In the trash," Myra whispered, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Mom threw away all the old pictures from the guest room." I looked up at Sabrina and something cold settled in my chest. "You threw away family photos." My voice came out dangerously quiet. She rolled her eyes. "They were cluttering up the space. We're redecorating, and those old pictures don't match the aesthetic we're going for." I stood up slowly, still holding that precious photograph and feeling my stubbornness shift into something darker, something more calculated. That picture was taken the day Adrian promised me we'd always stay close, no matter what. Sabrina laughed, and it was such a brittle, dismissive sound. "Oh please, Elias, you'll be forgotten just like Lillian was. It's called moving on." The words hung in the air between us, and I saw Myra flinch, and I felt my hands shake, but not from anger this time, from a weird calm that came over me. "You might want to talk to Adrian tonight," I said softly, carefully folding the photograph and slipping it into my jacket pocket. "About what?" Sabrina asked, but I noticed her voice had lost some of its confidence. "About what I delivered to my attorney this morning," I replied, turning to Myra and kissing the top of her head. "I love you, sweetheart, don't ever forget that." As I walked back to my car, I heard Sabrina call after me. "What attorney? Elias, what did you do?" I didn't answer because my heart was pounding, and my mind was already racing ahead to everything I had set in motion, and part of me wondered if I had gone too far, if my stubborn pride had pushed me to make decisions I couldn't take back. But then I remembered Myra's tears and that photo in the trash, and I knew there was no going back now. The thing is, I am not a planner by nature. I am a reactor, someone who makes decisions in the heat of the moment and deals with consequences later, which is probably why Lillian handled all our financial planning and long-term decisions while I focused on the day-to-day stuff. But after she died 3 years ago from cancer, I found myself forced to think differently, to actually look ahead, instead of just responding to whatever crisis landed in my lap. Those first months were brutal, not just because of the grief, but because suddenly I had to understand trusts and estates and investment portfolios, and all these complicated things Lillian had managed quietly in the background. I made mistakes, signed things I should not have signed, trusted people I should not have trusted, almost lost a significant chunk of our savings to a financial advisor who saw a grieving widow as easy prey. Adrian had to step in and fix that mess, which was humiliating for me, because I have always prided myself on being capable and self-sufficient, even when clearly I was not. That experience taught me something, though, taught me that sometimes you need to slow down and think 3 moves ahead instead of just reacting. And when I started noticing how Sabrina was slowly erasing Lillian's memory from Adrian's life, I knew I could not just confront it head-on like I wanted to, because that would only make things worse. It started small about 2 years ago, little things that I told myself I was imagining because my grief was making me paranoid. Sunday dinners at my place stopped because Sabrina said they had other commitments. Holiday traditions we had kept for decades suddenly were not convenient anymore. When I would call Adrian to chat, he would be brief, distracted, always saying he would call me back later, but rarely doing it. I noticed that photos of Lillian started disappearing from their house, replaced with modern art prints and minimalist decorations. The shelf where Lillian's favorite books used to sit got cleared out. Her recipe box that she had passed down to Adrian vanished. When I asked about it, Adrian just shrugged and said they were simplifying their lives, getting rid of clutter. I wanted to scream at him that his mother was not clutter, but I bit my tongue because confrontation would only push him further away, and I knew that even if I did not want to admit it. So I started documenting things instead. I kept a journal of every cancelled visit, every dismissed invitation, every time Myra mentioned something that concerned me. I took photos of their house during visits showing the gradual erasure of Lillian's presence. When Myra told me during one rare overnight visit that Sabrina had said Grandma Lillian was better off forgotten, because dwelling on the past was unhealthy, I wrote down the exact quote with the date and time. Part of me felt crazy doing this, like some paranoid old man who could not accept that his son had moved on with his life, but another part of me remembered how Lillian had always said trust your instincts, and my instincts were screaming that something was deeply wrong. 3 months ago I went to see Gerald Morrison, an estate attorney who had helped Lillian and me set up our family trust 20 years earlier. Gerald was semi-retired, but he agreed to meet with me as a favor, and I brought all my documentation, all my journals and photos and notes. Elias, what exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? Gerald asked, looking over his reading glasses at me with concern. I had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but sitting there in his office with mahogany furniture and law books lining the walls, I suddenly felt uncertain. I want to protect Lillian's legacy, I said, and I want to protect Myra. Gerald nodded slowly. From what exactly? That was the question I had been avoiding asking myself directly because it meant acknowledging something painful about my own son. From being taught that her grandmother did not matter, that family history is disposable, that love has an expiration date. My voice cracked saying it out loud. Gerald was quiet for a long moment, then he said, I can help you restructure the trust, but you need to understand this will likely damage your relationship with Adrian, possibly permanently. Is that a risk you are willing to take? I thought about Myra crying over that photograph, about all the traditions and memories being systematically erased, about how Lillian would feel seeing what was happening to our family. Yes, I said, even though my hands were shaking. What are my options? Over the next several weeks, Gerald and I worked on restructuring the family trust that Lillian and I had built over 40 years of marriage. It was substantial, more money than I liked to think about, because thinking about money always made me uncomfortable, which is probably another one of my flaws. There were rental properties in 3 states, investment accounts, the lake cottage that had been in Lillian's family for generations, shares in a small company I had started decades ago, life insurance policies, savings accounts. Originally, everything was set to transfer to Adrian upon my death, with the understanding that he would use it to provide for his family and eventually pass it down to Myra. But now I wanted conditions, protections, safeguards. Gerald drafted new terms that would place everything into a protected trust, specifically for Myra's benefit. Adrian would only serve as co-trustee if he completed mandatory family counseling and maintained regular documented contact with me for at least 5 years. If he refused, then an independent trustee would manage everything until Myra turned 18. Sabrina was explicitly excluded from any control over the trust assets. The lake cottage, which held so many family memories, could never be sold and had to remain accessible to Myra regardless of what happened. A portion of the trust was designated specifically for preserving family history, funding things like digitizing old photos and videos, creating a family archive, anything that would help Myra understand where she came from. The most controversial part was a clause stating that if there was documented evidence of deliberate destruction or disposal of family heirlooms, photographs, or items of sentimental value belonging to Lillian's estate, Adrian's role as co-trustee would be immediately terminated. I had photos of their house showing missing items. I had Myra's testimony about things being thrown away. I had dates and documentation. Gerald warned me this was aggressive, that it might not hold up if challenged, but I did not care because I needed Adrian to understand there were consequences for erasing his mother's memory. Signing those documents felt surreal, like I was betraying my own son, which maybe I was, but I kept thinking about what Lillian would want, and I knew she would want Myra protected even if it meant being tough with Adrian. My hands shook as I signed my name, and I almost backed out 3 different times, but Gerald just waited patiently, and finally I got through it. When do we notify them? I asked. I will send certified letters to both Adrian and Sabrina next week, Gerald said. They will also receive copies of the new trust documents and information about the family counseling requirement. I nodded, feeling sick to my stomach. There is no going back from this, is there? Gerald looked at me with sympathy. No, there is not, but sometimes protecting what matters means making hard choices. I left his office that day feeling like I had just set fire to my relationship with my son, and maybe I had, but my stubborn pride would not let me undo it, because admitting I was wrong has never been my strong suit. The next few weeks were torture because I knew the letters were coming, but I did not know exactly when, and I kept expecting my phone to ring with Adrian screaming at me. I barely slept, kept replaying conversations in my head, practiced what I would say when he confronted me. Part of me hoped he would just accept the new terms, go to counseling, start making an effort to include me in their lives again. But I knew Sabrina would see this as a declaration of war, and she would push Adrian to fight it. My anxiety got so bad I snapped at the grocery store clerk over nothing, hung up on a telemarketer with more anger than necessary, almost got in a fight with my neighbor over a property line dispute that did not even matter. Lillian used to call this my pressure cooker mode, when stress built up inside me until I exploded at random targets, and she would calm me down by reminding me to breathe and focus on what actually mattered. But she was not here anymore, and I was navigating this alone. Then came that day I went to visit with Myra's lemon cookies, and Sabrina blocked the door, and everything exploded faster than I expected. Standing there listening to her say Lillian would be forgotten, seeing Myra clutching that rescued photograph, I felt vindicated in what I had done, but also terrified because now it was real. Now there was no pretending everything might work out peacefully. When I told Sabrina about the attorney visit, I saw genuine fear flash across her face before she covered it with anger, and that almost made me feel guilty, except then she said, "You spiteful old man, you cannot control us with money." I wanted to tell her this was not about control, but about preservation, about making sure Myra grew up knowing her grandmother, about protecting family bonds from being severed by someone who saw the past as disposable clutter. Instead, I just said, "Talk to Adrian tonight," and walked away because I knew anything else I said would come out wrong, would sound vindictive or petty or mean, when really I just felt heartbroken. 3 days later, Adrian showed up at my house looking like he had not slept, his eyes bloodshot, his usually neat hair disheveled. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard his car pull up and my stomach dropped because I knew this conversation was going to be ugly. He did not knock, just used his key and came storming in. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, slamming a folder of documents on my kitchen table. I forced myself to stay calm even though my instinct was to match his energy, to yell back, to defend myself aggressively. "Sit down, Adrian, please." "I do not want to sit down. I want you to explain why you cut me out of the trust." His voice cracked and I could see tears in his eyes. "I did not cut you out," I said quietly. "I added conditions to protect." "Protect what?" "Your control over my life, your need to punish me for moving on after Mom died." That hurt more than I expected, and I felt my carefully maintained calm start to slip. "Moving on? Is that what you call throwing away her photographs, her books, every trace of her existence?" "We were redecorating, making the house feel like ours, not like a shrine to someone who is gone," Adrian shouted. "She was your mother," I shouted back, losing my composure. "She loved you more than anything, and you act like she never existed. That is not fair, and you know it. What is not fair is watching you let Sabrina erase her memory, watching you cancel family traditions, watching you push me out of your life." We were both breathing hard, faces flushed, and I realized we were doing exactly what Lillian would have hated, letting anger drive us apart instead of finding common ground. I took a shaky breath. "Adrian, please sit down, let me explain." He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly sank into a chair, his anger seeming to deflate into exhaustion. I sat across from him and slid the folder toward him. "Look at the actual terms, really read them." He opened the folder with shaking hands, and I watched his face as he read through the new trust structure, the conditions, the protections for Myra, the requirements for family counseling. "This is insane," he muttered. "You are making me jump through hoops like some kind of trained dog. I am asking you to make time for family, to work through our issues with professional help, to maintain a relationship with me and with your daughter's heritage," I said. "That should not feel like hoops. And if I refuse," I met his eyes, "then the trust transfers to Myra under independent management when she turns 18 and you get nothing." The bluntness of it seemed to shock him. "You would really do that? Cut me off completely, to protect what your mother built and to make sure Myra understands where she comes from?" "Yes," I felt my voice waver. "I do not want to, Adrian. I want you to choose to be part of this family again. But I cannot watch you erase your mother's memory and push me away and act like none of it matters." Adrian rubbed his face with both hands, and when he looked up at me I saw something shift in his expression. "Sabrina is furious. She wants to fight this, get lawyers involved." "I know," I said. "She has already called Gerald Morrison 3 times. He is not taking her calls. She says you are manipulating me, using money to control our lives." "What do you say?" I asked quietly. Adrian was quiet for a long time, then he said something that surprised me. "I say I am tired. I am tired of fighting, tired of being caught in the middle, tired of feeling like I am betraying someone no matter what I do." I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "Then stop fighting. Come to counseling with me. Let us work through this together." He looked at our hands, then pulled his away. "I need time to think. Sabrina and I need to discuss this." "Of course," I said, even though my heart sank because I knew what Sabrina would say, how she would frame this as my attack on their autonomy, their marriage, their right to live their lives however they wanted. Adrian stood up, gathering the documents. I do not know if I can forgive you for this, Dad. Even if I agree to the terms, I do not know if we can get past this. I know, I said quietly. But I would rather you be angry and in my life than indifferent and gone. He left without another word, and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time afterward wondering if I had just permanently destroyed my relationship with my son because of my stubborn refusal to just let things go, to accept that families change and people move on, and sometimes you have to release control, even when every instinct tells you to hold tighter. The weeks that followed were excruciating. Adrian stopped answering my calls. When I texted him asking about Myra, he would send brief, cold responses. She is fine. At school. Busy. I felt like I was being punished for trying to protect our family, and maybe I deserved it, because who was I to dictate how Adrian grieved his mother, or structured his marriage, or raised his daughter? My own flaws kept creeping up. My inability to admit when I might be wrong. My tendency to dig in and double down instead of seeking compromise. I lay awake at night having imaginary conversations where I apologized and took it all back, but then I would remember Myra's tears and that photograph in the trash, and I would steel myself again. 2 months after our confrontation, I got a call from Gerald. Adrian has agreed to the terms, he said. I felt my knees go weak with relief. He has, with conditions of his own. He wants family counseling to include Sabrina, not just you and him. He wants the sessions to be with a neutral therapist, not someone you choose. And he wants written assurance that you will not make any additional changes to the trust without consulting him first. These seemed reasonable, more than reasonable actually, and I wondered if Adrian had pushed for them or if this was Sabrina trying to maintain some control. I agree to all of that, I said. When do we start? He requested the first session be scheduled for next month. I will send you the details. After I hung up, I cried for the first time since Lillian's funeral, just sat on my couch and sobbed with relief and grief and fear all mixed together. Because even though Adrian had agreed, I knew this was just the beginning of a long, difficult process, and there was no guarantee it would heal what was broken. The first counseling session was awkward and tense. Dr. Patricia Chen, oh wait, I need to change that name. Dr. Patricia Williams was a family therapist in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Adrian and Sabrina sat on one side of her office couch. I sat in a chair across from them, and the physical distance felt symbolic of everything wrong between us. Let us start with why we are here, Dr. Williams said. Elias, would you like to begin? I looked at Adrian and Sabrina and felt my prepared speech evaporate. I felt like I was losing my son and my granddaughter, and I did not know how else to stop it from happening. By threatening us financially, Sabrina interjected coldly. Sabrina, you will have your turn to speak, Dr. Williams said gently but firmly. Elias, continue. After my wife died, I watched our family traditions disappear, our connection fade, and her memory get erased like she never mattered, I said, feeling my voice shake. I handled it badly, I know that. I am stubborn and I react instead of thinking things through, and I probably went too far with the trust changes, but I was desperate. You were controlling, Sabrina said. That is enough, Sabrina, Adrian said quietly, and I looked at him in surprise because he rarely contradicted her. Dr. Williams made a note. Adrian, how do you feel about what your father did? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Hurt, betrayed, manipulated. Each word landed like a punch. But also, he trailed off. Also what? Dr. Williams prompted. Also guilty, Adrian finally said, because he is not completely wrong. That session opened a floodgate. Over the next several months, we met every 2 weeks, and slowly, painfully, things started coming out. Adrian admitted he had been avoiding me because being around me reminded him too much of his mother, and the grief was overwhelming, so it was easier to just create distance. Sabrina revealed that her own mother had been overbearing and controlling, and when I started pushing for more family time and criticizing their decorating choices, she felt triggered and reacted defensively. I had to confront my own tendency to steamroll people when I felt threatened, to make unilateral decisions and then expect everyone else to fall in line. We talked about the photographs, the traditions, the missed dinners. Adrian confessed something that shocked me during one session. I helped throw away some of Mom's things, he said quietly. What? I stared at him. The photos in the trash that Myra found, I put some of those there, not all of them, but some. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Why? Because every time I looked at them I fell apart, Adrian said, tears streaming down his face. Because seeing her smile in those pictures made me remember she is gone, and I could not handle it, so I thought if I just got rid of them I would stop feeling this crushing grief all the time. Sabrina reached for his hand, and I saw genuine compassion in her face. Adrian, I did not know, she said softly. I thought you wanted to get rid of them too. I did, he said, but for different reasons than you thought. We sat with that revelation, and I felt my anger towards Sabrina shift, slightly because maybe this was not entirely her fault. Maybe Adrian had been complicit in ways I had not wanted to acknowledge, because it was easier to blame her than to accept my son was struggling. The revenge I had planned, the dramatic confrontation and financial consequences, suddenly felt hollow because the real issue was not about punishing anyone, but about healing a family that was broken by grief and miscommunication, and everyone's individual flaws and fears. But the trust changes stayed in place, and the counseling continued, and slowly things started to shift. Adrian and I had dinner together once a week, just the two of us at first, then sometimes with Myra. He started calling me on Sundays like he used to before Sabrina. Small traditions began returning, like making Lillian's famous chili recipe on the first cold day of fall or watching football games together. Sabrina remained distant, and I could tell she resented the counseling requirement, and probably still saw me as a controlling influence, but she stopped actively blocking my relationship with Adrian and Myra, and that felt like progress. 4 months into this new arrangement, Myra spent a weekend with me at the lake cottage, and we spent hours going through old photo albums, and I told her stories about her grandmother, about family history, about where she came from. She was fascinated, asking a million questions, wanting to know everything. "Why did Mom and Dad throw these pictures away?" she asked at one point, holding up a photo of Lillian holding baby Adrian. I chose my words carefully because I did not want to villainize her parents. Sometimes when people are sad about losing someone they love, they try to avoid things that remind them of that person because it hurts too much. "Your dad was very sad when Grandma died. But these pictures are not sad," Myra said. "They are happy memories." "You are absolutely right," I said. "And that is why we are going to protect them and preserve them and make sure you always have access to your family's story." We spent that weekend digitizing photographs, organizing them chronologically, creating both physical and digital archives. Myra helped me scan hundreds of images, listened to stories, wrote down family recipes from Lillian's old recipe cards. It felt healing in a way I had not expected, like we were building a bridge between the past and the future that could not be easily destroyed. But the true aftermath of my revenge, the real consequences, emerged gradually over the following year. Adrian did complete the 5 years of maintained contact that the trust required, but our relationship remained complicated, still scarred by the financial ultimatum I had used. He never fully forgave me for what he called weaponizing money, even though he understood why I did it. Sabrina and I maintained a polite but cold distance, her resentment simmering beneath surface civility at family gatherings. The counseling helped us develop communication tools and set boundaries, but it could not erase the fundamental breach of trust that my unilateral trust changes had created. The most unexpected consequence came during a counseling session about 8 months in, when Dr. Williams asked Adrian about his long-term concerns. "I worry about becoming like my father," he said, not looking at me. "What do you mean?" Dr. Williams asked. "Making decisions for people's own good without asking what they actually want or need. Using power and control to force outcomes instead of trusting relationships to develop naturally." I felt those words like a knife because they were accurate. They described exactly what I had done, and they revealed how much damage my stubbornness and pride had caused. "Adrian, do you think that is what I did?" I asked quietly. He finally looked at me. "Yes, Dad. And the worst part is I understand why you did it, and part of me is even grateful because it forced me to confront how much I was pulling away, but that does not make it okay." "You are right," I said, and admitting it felt both liberating and devastating. "I handled this in the worst possible way, and I am sorry." It was the first time I had actually apologized without qualifications or excuses, and I saw Adrian's expression shift. "Thank you for saying that," he said. Now, almost 2 years after that initial confrontation in the driveway, Myra is 11, and she has a deep connection to her grandmother's memory that I do not think would exist without my intervention, even if the method was flawed. The lake cottage has become her favorite place, filled with photo albums and family artifacts that she treasures. Adrian and I have dinner together most weeks, and while our relationship is not what it was before Lillian died, it is something real and honest, built on our shared commitment to Myra and to honoring family bonds even when they are complicated. Sabrina has softened slightly, particularly after Myra told her how much she loves learning about her grandmother and how special it makes her feel to be connected to her family history. I think Sabrina realized that erasing the past was not actually helping anyone, and maybe was even hurting Myra by denying her access to her heritage. But I live with the knowledge that my revenge, my calculated manipulation of the family trust, permanently altered the dynamics of our relationships in ways that cannot be undone. I got what I wanted, protection for Lillian's legacy and guaranteed access to my granddaughter, but the cost was my son's complete trust and the easy warmth that used to exist between us. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if I could have found a different way, if I had been less stubborn and prideful and controlling, if I had been willing to be vulnerable instead of strategic. Maybe I could have just talked to Adrian honestly about my fears, instead of creating financial ultimatums. Maybe if I had addressed my own grief, instead of focusing on everyone else's behavior, things would have resolved differently. The twist that I did not see coming was recognizing my own role in the breakdown of our family after Lillian died. I was so focused on how Adrian was pulling away and how Sabrina was erasing memories that I never examined how my own grief was manifesting as control and rigidity. I never asked Adrian what he needed from me, never considered that maybe my constant reminders about family traditions and my criticisms of their life choices were making his grief worse instead of better. I assumed I knew what was best because I am stubborn and proud and convinced of my own rightness, and that assumption led me to make choices that hurt people I love even as I told myself I was protecting them. The family trust remained structured as I changed it, with all its conditions and protections, a permanent monument to both my love for my family and my inability to simply trust them to navigate their own path. Myra will inherit everything when she turns 18 with full knowledge of where it came from and what it represents. Adrian has mostly accepted this arrangement, though I know it still stings. And I have accepted that the price of preserving Lillian's legacy was damaging my relationship with my son in ways that time might soften but never completely heal. Sometimes revenge is not about destroying your enemy, but about protecting what you love, and sometimes the person you end up hurting most is yourself and the people you were trying to save, and sometimes you have to live with that complicated, messy reality instead of the clean, satisfying victory you imagined when you started down this path.